We're live. Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, 3:30 Central, 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern, other time zones as well. I have the wonderful Alexandra Merz and Gary Black with me today. Lots to talk about. A lot to talk about. A lot of stuff going on in the Tesla community. A lot of stuff going on in the investing world related to Tesla. We got a lot of stuff going on with some rumors, some FUD, and just a bunch of stuff. And this is going to be, as usual, the reason why I love having Alexandra Gary on is we have very in-depth, detailed discussions with, oftentimes opposing views or, especially on topics that can be controversial. But I love having these two awesome people with me because there's very respectful dialogue that arises from these topics. And of course, in the comments section, as you listen to the conversation, feel free to add your own thoughts. Feel free to add whatever you want. My ask will be in the comment section to obviously keep it respectful. No ideas or thoughts should be, feel free to say whatever you want, but obviously as a listener, please do ensure that you keep in a respectful tone with the audience, because this is important stuff we got to talk through as an investing community, as a Tesla fan base, obviously. But a lot of folks are a little bit confused as far as what's going on right now. So I think this is going to be a valuable discussion. Alexandra, maybe set the stage for us a little bit of what's going through your mind, because you just came out of a conversation with Herbert about an hour and a half ago. Shout out Herder from Brighter. He's doing a great job over there. Maybe just kick this off. We have some items to talk about, but I think that'll be a good stage for us, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I was quite furious. Obviously, you two just made me laugh, so I'm a little bit better. But but it is true that this has been now the third day in the week where you just wake up in the morning, you get all this FUD, you get all these rumors, you get no reaction, or at least no official reaction from Tesla. The lack of communication from Tesla leaves this whole space unoccupied. And if you're a competitor, an enemy of Elon or of Tesla, you actually have such an easy game hurting us. And I'm saying us, and I said it earlier to Herbert, we're all investors in this company. This is, we all have a share of it, and we have to understand we have a share of it, and we shouldn't be shy to speak up when something just doesn't work and when we feel they don't see it. Now, we may not always be right. I always stop all those that go, who do you think you are and whatever, because we're getting our part of heat. And yes, we may not always be right, but they also may not be all the time right. And when I say they, I don't actually mean the execution at Tesla. I think the execution is still good. We can talk in detail about whether there's a demand issue or not later on, but I still think Tesla is just the most extraordinary company there is. I have my doubts to the efficiency currently of the board of directors. I want to express that quite clearly later on. I certainly see this lack of communication a bigger and bigger problem. We're talking about the 6th biggest mega cap in the world, and we're doing no communication because we don't like communication. I mean, this is kindergarten stuff. I'm sorry. This is just not of a level of an international company that's conquering the world, and of which we have heard in October that that's just 2 months ago, just don't forget it, that sooner or later this will be bigger than the number 1 and number 2 currently together, right? So it just, there has to be a proportion to it all, and there are days I'm exaggerated, and I just want to say it. And so I did say it with Herbert, and I'll say it again.
Gary, what do you think? It's sort of going off of Alexandra's thoughts here, and I'll be happy to kind of throw in my 2 cents as well.
Well, Alexandra's right. The silence is deafening, and I've never seen it. I follow a lot of companies, and as Alexandra says, it's the 6th largest market cap company, but it behaves like a little company in terms of its communications. And I'm just not used to that. Usually you get something from a company, and I don't really know who to blame. I'm not sure if it's because Elon's, focused on Twitter, or the IR department doesn't have enough staff, or just it's all the above. I'm not sure why. I don't really know what to make of it, but I agree. It's a very frustrating time, not just because the stock is down, but you can't get anything from the company. So you're left to kind of draw from, little snippets you see from competitors, from the trade rags. And look, my biggest frustration all along has been, it's fine not to have PR, but then stop whining about how biased the press is, because the press, people have to understand the way the press works. As competitors who have IR departments will feed stuff to the press will run with it, and then come up with a storyline, because it has to be differentiated. They'll contact us and say, well, we don't have any comment, or they don't even return the call. And then you're kind of left with this stuff that shows up in these trade rags that is maybe true, maybe false, maybe somewhere in the middle, but nobody's really trying to make it better. So everybody just does what they do. They sell the stock, and look, I'm not that focused on the short-term stock price, but it's very annoying as a manager knowing full well that the fundamentals are very strong, but there's just no communication. And I just wonder where the board is on this. Most boards would get involved and say, look, Martin, if it's IR, or Elon, if he's the CEO, here's what you need to be doing. But I don't know what the board's doing behind the scenes. Maybe there's a valid reason for it. Maybe we're going to hear about a share buyback today or something, and it's quiet. But they're not in their quiet period. The quiet period doesn't start for another week or so. So I'm not sure why we've got no information coming out of the company.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my standpoint, I've been trying my best to look at this thing. I'm trying to remove my Uber bull hat. I'm trying to remove my super passionate, I've been following this company for 10 years. And obviously, I'm very proud to be a Tesla shareholder, very proud to have worked there, very proud to own the products. But now my sort of thought process is shifting on this quite a bit. And so the way I view it is, especially related to this comms FUD fighting sort of phase that we're in right now. Back in 2016 to 2019, when Tesla was getting hit from all sides, while it was, kind of a quote unquote baby company, strapped for cash, super strappy, very dependent on the markets to raise cash, right? And they're just hair on fire. They're trying to move as quickly as possible. There was a community that very organically grew out of that in Twitter and in YouTube and everywhere else that was very unique to that story, that was doing that for the company. Essentially, they were the voice, they were the PR, they were the comms, they were that sort of hey, everybody, let's look at what's really happening here. And I think during that time, it kind of made sense for that to exist, because again, the company in my head, and right or wrong, needed quote unquote all the help it could get. And so in that way, it made a lot of sense. But now you fast forward to say this time, where the company's financials are the best in the industry, I would argue. Basically, note that 20 billion in cash, an embarrassment of talent. They have so many talented people in there. They have an amazing leader. They have an amazing product, right? And then I think about the context of this FUD fighting comm issue. I'm like, okay, so you have the means and you have the brains. I'm just a little bit, I guess, worried and concerned that perhaps the FUD fighting and all the stuff that's happening in the community is kind of hiding a little bit of what's really going on, which is hey, you have a lot of folks that are not happy right now. They're just not happy. And yeah, go ahead, please.
And that, no doubt that the low stock price gets to everybody. Even if you're a medium or long-term investor, you have to look at it every day and you're just like, what, 170 again? Why, right? We moved up, we came closer to 200, back we are. So this is nerve-wracking, even though you don't need to sell. If you can buy, fine. And I hear all those saying, oh, why do you worry? Buy. Sure, I do. I actually dollar cash average for the last 2.5 years. But it doesn't reflect at all the value it has today. And it's not just by 10%. I think it actually is worth double of what we're today. And I don't see us going up, while this whole attitude from Tesla and from the market towards Tesla is stuck where it is. And I just feel us retail investors, we are more or less without the means to counter it now. Because you can throw out so much good data and you can say, look how wonderful this company is, just nothing moves. And then when this morning I saw Leo Kyogan getting really upset, one side I love it, right? There's no doubt about it.
I like him being pissed.
Me too. There's no doubt about it.
Leo Kyogan is the largest individual retail shareholder, correct?
Third largest, yes.
Third largest, thank you.
Yes,
sorry,
third
continue.
Largest, and he has been going for a long time on sharebacks like Gary, like me in my little position, and he argues it exactly the same way we do, meaning the price is so low. It's nearly a crime to not pick it up now. This is not about increasing instantly the share price. If that is a side effect, even better. But this is about showing that the company has confidence in this share price today and says, look, this is too ridiculous. We have to pick it up rather than having all this money on our money market account and take it out of the market. And again, there are then different technicalities. Do you put it as treasury reserve or do you just retire the stock? All good. But the action itself would just show that they understand how to manage the money in the best possible way for their shareholders, for us, That's just it. And like I said, we did that petition. We got nearly 6,500 signers of the petition, some very large shareholders in there. I sent twice emails to Martin Vieira because he's the only one that's there, right? I wish I could really send it to the board members straight away. I asked that this is transferred to the board, that the retail shareholders, no reaction, not even an acknowledgement that these emails were received. I know there were from other sources, but from Tesla, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges, again, as a fund manager, so since Elon closed his Twitter deal, which in theory doesn't affect Tesla directly, Tesla's down 24%, NASDAQ is flat. That's since October 28th. And if you go back to when he first made his bid, Tesla's down 47. I think NASDAQ's down 17. So I get people saying, well, it's just macro. It's just, the Fed's raising rates and, if you beta adjust it, it's not, okay? It's like you're deluding yourself. You think it's all beta. Again, down 24 versus 0 in the 6 weeks or so since he closed Twitter, or 5 weeks. That's a big difference. And so, I could see why somebody like Leo, who's the most mild-mannered billionaire I've ever met, he's a nice guy. And for him to be as mad, and I'll use that term, as he was this morning, going, he wrote a tweet just MIA, where's the board, MIA. I was shocked by it, but I was glad because if anybody can get their attention, it's Leo. He owns 10 million shares, right? And
yeah, so, but then just while he shouldn't do communication, he's obviously investor relations, and so he should be the one in relationship with Leo. He didn't react at all to Leo's tweet, and the contrary, he actually tweets very little. But today he tweeted about a stick shift. I don't know how you say it. EV, right? So something completely out of manual, exactly. And so I just thought, like, what is this? You have your third biggest shareholder having a fit. I understand why he has a fit. How about, something rather than nothing? But there we are.
Most firms, you have a CFO who's very engaged with the largest shareholders. And look, I don't expect Zach to talk to me, but usually, the CFO will talk to people like Leo who have that many shares. And Zach just comes across as, I don't know, the word is indifferent, but I know he talks to large buy-side investors who own the stock, but we don't really get that much from him. And that's different from other companies I invest in, where the CFO is always out there. And look, they drive the communications effort because they realize what's going on. And when the stock is getting decimated the way this one is, usually the CFO or the head of IR are out there saying, look, we need to do the following 3 things just to kind of put a Band-Aid on it. And it's not about short-term stock price performance. It's just, you don't want to lose your big shareholders who just give up and say enough. I'm tired of the lack of communication, lack of effort, I guess I would use.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. You've been on board of companies.
Yep.
When you're on a board in America, how often do you meet with the other board members? Does everybody have a certain thematic to address, or is everybody in charge of everything?
Yeah. Well, there's committees, and as you know, but we used to, and I've been on 2 public boards. We'd meet every month, or we'd do a call every month. And I think, and I've talked to different people, Tess, I think they have the same cadence. It's once a month. And I think they do more calls than actual in-person meetings. But, then you've got different roles that different people play. And I think Larry Ellison used to play a more, this is what we need to do board. And since Larry left, I'm not sure who takes the lead, if you will. When you have a board like this one, it's small and it's a lot of Elon's friends and, people
Brother.
he knows.
Mm-hmm.
They're beholden to the CEO, but Elon doesn't seem to be that involved with Tesla these days. And, that we'll talk about the global CEO rumors. He spends a lot of his time at Twitter and he's sleeping at the Twitter headquarters. So it's hard to know if he's driving the board cadence or there's somebody else. I can't see it. It's kind of invisible to me.
Yeah. And obviously then let's just currently join the board.
Yeah.
I think the oldest member on the board is just now 4 years on the board. I mean, I have the feeling that this is quite a young group, young not in age, but young in interactions. And the other thing is, I mean, I checked this morning, but I prefer hearing it from you, Gary. As a board member, you have a responsibility, right? You have a responsibility that actually your personal liability to it, right?
You have personal liability, but again, as a board member, what I found, and not to knock the companies I was on boards with, I found a lot of times the outside directors didn't do much work in between board calls or board meetings, but then the day before I'd get, like, as a CEO, I would get calls from people saying, can you tell, because they get the materials. You'd send out a book of materials that we were going to go through. And then they would call me up and say, what are you trying to get done with this? What does this mean? Blah, blah, blah. And I would bet it's probably similar here, where they don't do that much work in between the meetings or the calls, but then they get a book and then they have to go through it. And look, during a board meeting, you're supposed to participate. You're not supposed to just sit there and be silent. And so I would imagine there's pressure to at least contribute during these board calls. But we wouldn't always talk about the stock price falling, but if it was falling as much as this one, and you just got to put it in perspective. Tesla's down. It's one of the worst performers in our portfolio this year. It's down 50% year to date. And yet the fundamentals look so strong. And, the estimates keep going up. Year to date, 22 earnings estimates are up 43%. 23 estimates are up 43%, but the stock is down 50. And you could say, well, NASDAQ's down 20, but even if you beta adjust it, the beta on Tesla over the last year is about 137, 138. It still doesn't explain it all, especially with the fundamentals so strong. So if I'm a board member, I should be asking that question: why is our stock doing so poorly? Because that is, to your point, Alexandra, that is their it's not their fiduciary, but it's definitely something that they should be in charge of, at least trying to explain to shareholders, here's what's happening.
So exactly. So there are a couple of things that I want to pick up. First of all, you said people will have to come into these meetings prepared. I mean, Farzad can certainly attest to that. Elon has put in place in all his companies, and he did it now at Twitter again, those rules that he wrote, I think, in 2014 or 2016. Don't get into a meeting if you have nothing to say. Leave the meeting if it's not for you, whatever. He's the most efficient meeting driver.
100%.
I just can't believe that in October, in that pump it all earnings call, he was like, we want to do buybacks, but it's the board that's going to look after it.
Yes, it's a timing issue. You have to have the right process, I think he said.
Exactly. If the right, I mean, and so the process for sitting in a meeting prepared can't be done in 6 weeks. Where is it? Who is not doing their job?
I don't know. Like I said, it's invisible to me. I can't see it, and there's no communication out of the company. I just think, again, when you got the CEO who's spending, I don't know how much of his time at Twitter, but let's call it 80, 90%.
150?
150. He's going to drive the cadence, and he's going to be the one, in the absence of a very strong CFO or in the absence of a lead director who's driving things. You're not going to see the, let's charge mentality that I've seen, at other boards. And, this company, it's got all the right fundamentals. And look, there's two overhangs in the stock. One is Twitter, one has been China, and we could talk about both of those. In China, you're seeing it now. You're seeing it with, rumors about production cut. You're seeing a temporary promotion that's in place at least through the end of the year. And look, the board should probably be involved in those type discussions, right? You probably get a book. I used to get a book, once a month saying, here's the monthly results. And usually you get, some kind of, here's what we're going to be doing for the rest of the year. And if the volumes are going to be light, and just remember in the third quarter, Elon was talking about epic fourth quarter. Zach gave a guidance, we'll call it, of just under 50% delivery growth for the year. They're nowhere near just under 50%. So, one of the questions I have is, legally, are you supposed to update your guidance if you know it's wrong? And legally, they don't have to, but they should. It's good practice. And I don't expect. I had this discussion with a big investor the other day. When a board knows that their guidance is wrong, or the CFO or the CEO's guidance is wrong, do you update? Some do, but some don't. And the SEC doesn't seem to push them on it. So I don't expect them to update their guidance before, their fourth quarter earnings, which is, probably middle of January, even though Elon's out there saying epic fourth quarter, which is not a guide, but Zach gave very specific guidance. It said just under 50% delivery growth, and we're on track for 50% production growth for the year. And they're not going to make those numbers. And the question is, and so far,
just sorry to jump in, when Zach said something, I actually took it really to the bank, right? I mean, I love Elon, but time is not time, and epic is maybe less epic. But when Zach
Zach
said
says
it,
something,
no,
you listen. Yeah, he loses
yeah.
credibility by not being able to hit a number after. And again, this was what, 6 weeks ago, end of October, they did their call. So this isn't forever ago. And look, part of it is the Chinese economy is kind of a roller coaster. You got, COVID shutdowns, and now the government's saying, we're not going to shut things down. We're going to ease up on the regulations if, somebody has COVID. So part of it is definitely macro driven with China, and you know that. But I also think part of it's their own doing. That they're not buttoned up in the way they're explaining things that are going on in China. And this whole thing with, the press has a rumored production. I mean, not just one, but you had Reuters and Bloomberg both saying it. And then, a day later or 2 days later, you hear about this 6,000 yuan promotion through the end of the year after China, basically Tesla China just, said, no, we're not cutting production, or it's false information, I think they called it.
Yeah.
You would think that somebody in IR would at least get the word out to somebody in the press. They don't have to put out a press release to just say, here's what's going on. So that people like, our average shareholder knows what is happening, but nobody's doing that. So we're all kind of left trying to figure it out for ourselves. And that's what's causing the uncertainty. If I'm an institutional PM, I get rid of the stock, and then I say, you know what, I'll think about it later. I don't have time. If I've got 50 names in a portfolio, I don't have time to be spending 20% on one name. And that's the way the average Fidelity portfolio manager thinks.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to talk Twitter because we'll get in a fight again, but let's talk China.
You guys fight? I never heard you fight.
Did that. Been there. but let's get to China. So we do understand the big problem is China. That's what I think is actually my strongest argument for me to say that this new China CEO worldwide story is wrong. I could not consider at all that at this crucial moment for China, they would put their best man for Asia Pacific into this global role and not focus on the area where there's actually currently pain.
But let's be specific. First of all, I don't buy the rumor. I don't think he's going to take over as Tesla CEO. Could he take over in the old Jerome Golan type job where he's the head of automotive global? Sure. And they could give him a title like, his title now is president of China or something like that. He could be the global CEO of automotive for Tesla, where, and that might be a good position to have, right? Because at least Elon is still the CEO. And I know institutions would be devastated if Elon were to say, you know what, I'm not going to be CEO anymore of Tesla. I have too much going on at Twitter, or I love working at Twitter, whatever. And a lot of institutions would sell the stock if Elon were to disappear. I can tell you that right now. But if you put in a strong number two and it becomes clear that Tom is the de facto number two, which, we had talk in that trial a couple of weeks ago, that the board has identified a potential number two, that would be a good view. People would like that. Then that we'd know that there's somebody else that they're grooming for the CEO job at some point. And it would be somebody who could complement, and this guy works 24/7 from what I've heard.
Yeah.
And he's aligned with Elon's vision. And, everything I hear about this guy is so positive, and it fits very much with the Tesla culture. And he's built the China business into the largest business. So I would have no problem if he became the global head of, we'll call it automotive, which is, that's a good job. And it's clearly a number two job. And that would make perfect sense.
And I agree with you on a couple of things, actually. So I did dig up his CV. He joined Tesla in 2014, initially in charge of superchargers. Very quickly, I think he joined in April. In December, he got his first promotion, got promoted very, very quickly. Last thing we heard was in July this year, and that was Bloomberg reporting, him taking over the whole of Asia Pacific.
That's right. That's his title now.
Responsibility. Exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, did Tesla ever confirm officially? No, you're dreaming. Of course not. But there we are. That was the last. So 4 months ago, he got promoted to Asia Pacific, and maybe now this. if really this is it, let's just play it through. How in the world would you announce that? Would you really let it leak to the worst little news agency in China against whom you have won a law case because they've been lying before? Let's assume it's right, then the communication was completely off again, and assume it's wrong, then please search for the leak. I mean, maybe they just made it up, but actually it's not so improbable.
It makes sense.
Exactly, it could actually make sense.
But it's not as CEO of Tesla.
No, director of automotive. Yeah.
There's no way that he's coming in as CEO of Tesla.
And I mean, Shanghai is the best production site, right? I mean, and he has gone through those COVID lockdowns. He slept there 24 hours a day. Not slept, but worked and slept there. And he seems to have really earned the respect of everybody, including Elon. So yeah, maybe he is it, and that's fine. But just how do we learn that? By the worst news outlet? What's this?
Look, that's the way a lot of times somebody knows somebody, they hear something, and then if you're a good reporter, you start calling around, you get somebody to confirm your theory, and that's the way it works. I'm more impressed when I look at, and again, I put my CEO hat on. I think this guy's made some really good decisions in a very tough environment. Remember, there's 5 or 6 big players in China led by BYD who are very aggressive. They're the under $30,000 EVs, and it's a tough macro environment. Yeah. And I've been impressed by this guy's his flexibility. So you take what drove the stock down this morning, for instance. They're doing a promotion, and it's 6,000 yuan, which is about 2% on existing Model 3 and Model Y inventory. And if you were to say, okay, and so here's the big debate today. Is it a permanent price cut, or is it just a promotion for three or 4 weeks? Because in the US, it makes sense to have a promotion, which they have. It's $3,750 to bring volume forward, to try to make sure that, people don't wait until January 1st to take delivery. So that one, everybody got that. Okay. Even though people didn't like it, it made sense. This one didn't make any sense. And so the debates, I'd say it's 50-50 I've had today with people. They say, no, this is a price cut in disguise. And there's, a guy I used to work with, Tony Sacconacci at Bernstein. He's a bear. He's been a bear since 2020. He cast it as a price cut. And people have to remember, who are listening to this, in the institutional world, you've got thousands of salespeople going out with a morning call that's taking what the analysts say, and they're going and talking to all these institutional managers. And usually you get a call or you get an email. Like I get an email from every single brokerage, and I can read what's going on. And so I always laugh when people say, well, you're just spreading FUD. You're relaying what this newspaper said or Tony Sacconacci. I said, no, everybody knows because everybody's on the same email chain that I'm on. So what happened is they put this promotion in, and I'm in the camp that this is a promotion till the end of the year because somebody screwed up in China. They probably produced too much, and rather than, and Troy's been very good at this, and he knows his stuff. Rather than set up export, for say the beginning of December, because they realized they weren't going to get enough orders in. You could have set up a couple ships and gotten it exported out. They haven't really exported anything in December, but I believe they will. And so at the end of the day, it's not a disaster. And I think it's really just to kind of offset the fact that they made too much product, and they didn't want to get into year end where they had so much inventory on hand, because nobody likes to be at the end of the year with, 3 times the amount of inventory you normally have. And so I believe that that's why they put this promotion in place. And I think that now they'll adjust production going forward because there isn't enough demand for economic reasons. I don't think it's because of competitive reasons. I think it's just economy. But the economy in China is starting to open. So they can always adjust production back. They could cut it back for 2 weeks and then, decide they'll put it back.
So you actually believe that rumor. You don't believe the rebuttal that was then
No, I believe there's some, but here's the punchline. If you take that 6,000, take the worst case, take the 6,000 yuan promotion, say, let's suppose it extends into next year. Okay. That's 10 cents a share in earnings because you're only talking about the China domestic volume. You don't count the export volume. So we know that China's making about a million per year. But if you take the fourth quarter, and even if you grow it at a little bit, 10, 15%, and you multiply that times 6,000 yuan, put it into dollars, tax affected, divide by 3.6 million shares, it's 10 cents a share, guys. It's 2% of the earnings. That doesn't warrant whatever Tesla was down today, 4%, it shouldn't have been down that much.
Yeah.
And so something else is going on. And I think, and look, I encourage people to read the bears reports. Tony is the best of the bears. He's been wrong, but people don't pay Tony for his stock recommendations. They pay because he's very good at figuring out. He's very good at analysis, and he's very good at figuring out like what's really going on. And he's the number one rated Apple analyst, for like 15 years in a row. And hedge funds pay him for his bearish view on Tesla because you're not going to listen to Gordon Johnson on Tesla. He's an idiot. Okay. But you will listen to Tony because Tony's viewed as very credible. And when you read his report, he will say, he believes the price cuts are going to be extended into next year. So he's anticipating further price cuts. And he also acknowledges that look, costs are coming down. So they may be able to cover these price cuts with cost cuts. Their gross margins may not even fall. And so I respect that. At least he, as a bear, he's acknowledging what could go right for Tesla. And I do believe they'll figure out a way how to, figure out to cut costs if they have to extend these prices. I don't believe that. I think that this promotion will end on December 31st, and maybe you'll get another promotion next year. But I don't believe it'll be a permanent price cut.
And I think too, like there's another thing to be said about having inventory available is not such a bad thing. I mean, one of the things that sucks about some markets is like it takes literally months to get a Tesla, so like having additional inventory ain't bad. And if you have, 30+% margin on a product and you need to stoke a little bit of it, you drop the price and all of a sudden thousands of people can get a car the next day. Like, why is that a bad thing? I view that as a positive.
Too much though, Farzad. And look, you got to go through the math. This quarter, fourth quarter, depending on what you think December will be, they've had 75,000 units delivered locally, so in China for October, November, and they've had 97,000 exports. So you can, make some assumptions about December, but you take domestic and exports together, you're only going to get about 250,000 units. And they're making more than that. They're making at a rate of 1.1 million. Okay. So you can't let inventory build, every single month. Where are you going to put everything? But they can definitely export more out. And that's why I think somebody screwed up, or, collectively a bunch of people screwed up. They thought with the price cut on October 24th, and they thought with the subsidy, there's a 12,000 subsidy expiring on December 31st. Plus there's another 11,000 subsidy for the batteries, electric batteries in Shanghai only. They probably thought that a lot of people would be rushing to buy Teslas before the end of the year, take delivery. It didn't happen. I think if they knew that, they would have exported more out.
Well, it did a couple of days, but not long enough to sustain. The other thing I think we read yesterday, that the first one of those subsidies, 50% of that is finally carried over into 2023. So it's not as if it's completely breaking away, but that was only known yesterday. So obviously for November buyers, that was unknown. So I mean, I agree with you. It's a tough market in China. I mean, I don't think we realize in the United States at what point they are in a different environment. I mean, this was still an emerging economy with high growth rates. This COVID zero policy obviously is now finally ending. Is it ending now? Is it ending after the winter? Is it ending at least after Chinese New Year, which is end of January, right? Which is just after the earnings call. So it is still a very moving post, right? It's not something where people really get a grab of, will this domestic demand really pick up? So you believe the Y production line reduction was actually real?
I don't know if the details are right, and I can't tell if it's because, again, it's nobody's talking to me, nobody's talking to anybody. But I believe there's probably some element of truth to the rumor. I just don't know the details. I don't know if it's 20% of Model Y, 20% overall. And look, they came out and said it's false information when you translate it back into English, but they didn't just deny it flatly, which to me was telling, right? They just said false information, which to me is like, some of this is false, but not all of it, right? So, and it wouldn't surprise me because there is a lot of inventory in China. And to your right, Farzad, you don't want to have to wait 6 weeks for a car, but people are used to doing that with Tesla. That's the culture. It's a desired product. It's a premium product. If you can get it right away, it may not be viewed with such high esteem. If you can walk into a dealer and get a car the next day, then you're kind of like every other car company. I don't think people mind waiting a couple of weeks. They don't want to wait 6 months, but if you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks for a car, that's not such a bad thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think wait times is really a problem. I think if we have short wait times, people will be happy. If we have long, well, it is what it is, because there's still an intrinsic wish to own a Tesla, right? People will just have to accept whatever it is. I don't believe. I mean, they obviously don't want to have a lot of inventory because it costs money to have cars sitting there, and they have to be updated all the time. And I mean, you know how quick they change all the stuff, and having suddenly 3 months old car sitting in a lot waiting for buyers is not what they.
I mean, I also think too, like I mean, again, if there is, I agree with Gary. Like where I get stuck is like Tesla's overall mission is to like literally just flood the market with EVs, like just in a very simplistic manner. Just make as many EVs as you humanly can, and you've built production at a factory to do that. Then I think, at least from my time there, the mentality is, I don't think it's reduced production. It's like figure out how to get these units out. Like just get them somewhere else. And I think Gary's point of like maybe there was a timing issue with the export of those units that could be like, well, we overproduced by 20% and then it's being spun as they're reducing 20%, like somehow. In my head, it's a complete non-issue. It's like a thing that happens short term. They'll find buyers for it. And if there needs to be some sort of lever that gets pulled for ensuring that product gets sold, yeah, it's going to be a hit on margin. But to Gary's point, costs are like plummeting throughout the entire supply chain. So it could be an absolute non-issue.
Look, but yesterday, sorry, Gary, yesterday you had a tweet which actually hurt me in the heart, where you said the story has to change. Yeah, Tesla still pretends they can sell any car they produce. That narrative has to change. So explain us what you meant with that.
I've never bought into that, because look, I kind of got involved with Tesla when everybody else was coming into the EV business. And I realized that competitors like GM and Ford and Volkswagen have been trying to get into the EV business for a couple of years and have largely failed. But when I look at China, I see 5 or 6 fairly strong competitors with the backing of the Chinese government. And I just think in China, at least, it's a very competitive business. And Elon has said that as much himself. And when you take something like BYD, which is now the market leader in EVs in China, and all their cars are under $30,000 if you convert it back to dollars, they have a very strong position. And they've got, unlike the old BYD, where they look kind of boxy, they hired a couple really good designers and the cars look nice. So I think it's a real competitive issue. And so I go, and this is a debate we should have with the $30,000 car. And, you go back to the semi presentation where they had, that blanket over something, and it could have been a pillow, or it could have been cardboard boxes, or it could have been a car.
It's a pillow.
I laughed at what Farzad, the way you interpreted it. So he said, "Hey, Farzad, it could have just been a pillow that was blown up." I just think they got to get that $30,000 car out there if they want to compete effectively in China, because BYD is not backing off at all.
But didn't they increase prices? Didn't BYD increase prices?
January 1st, they announced the price increase. So I keep going back to that first point I make is Tom Zhou has been proven himself a very good manager in China. He dealt with COVID, shutdowns, dealt with all this competition coming in, and still managed to build a great business in China. So that's point number one. So he's earned whatever promotion they may give him. And I hope that he does get promoted to the number 2 guy at Tesla. But I don't want Elon to walk away, because I know a lot of institutions would sell their shares if he were to say, I'm done. I feel like I'm not doing enough for Tesla, so I'm going to resign as CEO and I'm going to devote all my time to Twitter. That would be a disaster from a stock standpoint in my mind. A lot of institutions would get out. Second point I want to make is I don't think this promotion is the worst case that the market's obviously looking at it. I don't think it's going to get carried over to next year. I just don't. I think it's going to be a way to clear inventory. And look, they're going to have to be better at managing each month. And remember, they said they're going to try to get rid of the delivery waves. They didn't do that. Okay. So the first month is always very export oriented. The second's kind of half and half. And the third is always all domestic with no exports. And I think they got to December, and if they wanted to export stuff out, you can't just like call up a rower and say, hey, get over here, I'm going to load a bunch of cars on it. You got to plan it out 15 to 30 days in advance. And I think they just screwed up. They had this weird promotion, which I still don't quite understand it, that you got like these credits that you could then take the credits if you bought a car and exchange it for miles. That just sounded so gimmicky to me. I couldn't understand it. And if I can't understand it, that means the average person in China couldn't understand it. And to me, it's like they should have just done this promotion, which they're doing now, which again, it's only 2%. They should have done that 2 weeks ago, and they would have known where they stand and how many cars they actually need for domestic purposes, right? And then the rest you just export out. But somebody didn't do that. But they'll fix that.
One thing I don't understand, the Taiwanese market that was heating up for months and even short years now, right? Now they say they will deliver. Why don't they deliver in December? That's the shortest boat trip. Now, why do they start? Why do they do that now in January?
But it's a small market. It doesn't move the needle. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of cars. You're not going to sell that many cars in Taiwan.
Okay, but you didn't answer my question. Is why will the narrative have to shift from we're selling every car we produce?
Because I never believe that. I know you do, but I just don't see that. I don't see that, because I hear Elon say that, and for years I've objected to that. It's like, come on, with all the competition coming in, you could have said that 2 or 3 years ago when nobody could make EVs at scale, right? But you can't say that today, especially when you got all these Chinese producers like BYD who could ship stuff out of China, which they will. And I just don't buy that argument anymore, because everybody is now realizing that they have to be in the EV business. So everybody's putting all their R&D and all their CapEx behind producing electric cars. And so, you gotta, I guess I'm always looking at the world 3 to 5 years out, that you can't say stuff like that when you know that 3 to 5 years from now, you're going to have so many EVs on the market. And, people will be able to walk into a Ford dealer or a Volkswagen dealer and get an EV within a week or two, right? Right now you can't, but you will be at some point, because everybody is putting a lot of production capacity down to make EVs. And that's a change from where we were a couple of years ago. So I never bought into that argument, by the way.
If I could, but I think the way I view it is that there's still the fleet of the entire world fleet is still, 97% gas cars. And so the way I think about competition in that sense, again, like, yes, of course, BYD, Ford, GM, every single automaker now and their grandmother wants to make an EV nowadays, right? So that's become obvious. But again, it's not, I don't think it's a versus Tesla sort of market share that you're taking away from. It's versus gas car market share that you're taking away from. And when Tesla has, I think, the pricing power it has from a margin perspective, again, like, no shareholder wants to lose margin, but if they're able to lower costs through their new factories that are going live, I still feel like they're going to be in an environment where they will be able to sell every car they produce. I really do think so. I think if once Berlin and Austin are fully ramped and the new Gigafactory gets announced here in the next, hopefully, 3 to 6 months, and then the $25,000-$30,000 car goes live in the next couple of years, then let me ask you.
Then let me ask you the question.
Gary says, well, that's a lot of ifs.
That's a big assumption. And that, look, if what you just said was true, and they had a $30,000 car available, at least in China and Europe, I don't care about the US, middle of next year, I would agree with what you just said, but they don't. And they're still dicking around with it, where maybe it's going to be a Robotaxi without pedals and without wheels, or without a steering wheel.
That would be amazing.
Let's give us some wheels.
If I just had a $30,000 car that you were going to make, once they can get to 99.9%, autonomous, then you could take off the steering wheel and the pedals, and I'm sure designers could figure out how to do that. But I would get the $30,000 car at least to compete in China with BYD, and then you wouldn't have to be cutting price on Model 3 and Model Y. I mean, that's what was interesting about Tony's report. He really jumps to conclusions. I don't know if you guys know this, but you can't order a Model 3 long range in the US. The only thing you can order is a standard range,
in a couple of weeks,
and a performance. Yeah. And the long range, the last price was about $57,000. You got to get the price down to $55,000 to qualify for the $7,500.
But that's what they will do. That's why there will be a.
I don't think they'll do that. I don't think they'll do that.
I think
they're going to bring out a mid range. I think they're going to bring out a lower performing car and call it a mid range. So then you'll have a short range, a mid range, and a performance, and they'll price it accordingly rather than cut price of what's already out there. And look, that's the tried and true strategy of consumer products companies. When there's a market and it's that $55,000 price point is going to be a key part, because that's where you get the $7,500 credit. You got to have a product in that segment. So you can either cut the price of the one that's up there by $2,000 or $3,000, that's fine, or you can introduce a product that at least you've got some room, and with option add-ons and things like that, it's still well below $55,000. I think that's what they're going to do in the US.
So how do you take Elon's comments around our prices are embarrassingly high? Isn't that a signal that says that prices will come down across the board at some point?
Sure.
Or
And strategically, that's always been the initiative to try to get, EVs to have wider adoption, right? That's you want to make them the same price as ICE cars. So that's always been the strategic initiative that Elon has espoused. But then you look at what they've done over the last couple of years. They've taken prices, where a Model Y today in the US costs $66,000.
because they had to, though, right? I mean, they were production constrained more than anything. Just they had too much demand. The market was demanding that price.
But not today. Not today.
Well, and one thing Martin once said was no more problems with batteries, right? They have enough batteries to do everything they want. So let's take him by the word for that.
Look, I think you got to keep China separate. China is where all the action is. I think, when we saw the third quarter delivery miss, it was because of China. We at the time, we got a lot of grief from people, said a lot of people were waiting because they thought there was going to be a price cut, and they were waiting for that. And then there was a price cut, even though Tesla denied it. Then there was a price cut on October 24th, which got the Model Y standard range in China down below that magic 300,000 yen price point where there's that 12,000 subsidy. And I think that, going forward, they have to be much more sensitive to what are those price points that are kind of the magic price points. And that 300,000 yen is still going to stay a magic price point. They have to have a car or at least a couple cars that are below that. And I think in the US, it's the same thing. You got to be below the $55,000 price on a sedan. And right now they have just one car that's that in the sedan category. And that's the standard range.
Yeah, sure.
And in the SUV category, which is an $80,000 price point, they get there easy. But Model 3, they should have two cars in that price point below 55 to get that $75 credit, because consumers are going to think like that come January 1st. So to your question, Farzad, will they take further price cuts? Maybe, but they may just introduce new products at a lower price point without taking down the existing prices. I wouldn't care if they took price down, because they've taken so much pricing. And I went back to 2020 and looked at what happened in China.
It's a lot of price increases.
No, they took prices down 4 times in 2020. And as you know, the stock price still went through the roof. So it wasn't like the market cared, because you make it up in volume, right? And so that's I wanted to call up Tony today, because I know him from working with him, Tony Sakanaki, and say, hey, look, you cut your estimates because you took price down, but you didn't change your volume estimates. That's not right. You would think that if you take prices down, you're going to sell more. And to your point, I do think Elon still in the back of his mind wants lower prices, because he wants to have greater EV adoption, and that benefits Tesla. So I'm not opposed to prices going down. I just think there's got to be some offset. Either you get more volume, or more likely, costs are coming down in line with it, so your margins don't suffer.
I have a question to you, Gary. I follow obviously Troy Tesla. I'm a patron. I think you are too. He's had a lot of heat. But if I reflect on what happened, I mean, sometimes he underestimates, sometimes he overestimates. That happens to any analyst. But if I look at his current statements, he was actually right on most of what's happening in China, right?
Yeah. And look, he's got good sources there. And I've talked to Troy many times. I wouldn't say I'm closer to him than anybody. I think I'm pretty close to Troy. He's a great analyst. And those who give him grief for quote unquote spreading FUD are just, they're off. They're just wrong. As an analyst who's also gotten a lot of grief when I put stuff out, especially when I complain about Elon, you have to have people who are willing to say, here's what can go wrong. Institutions will never complain about Adam Jonas, who's a bull. He's got a Tesla price target of 330. He's got to buy in the stock for painting a negative picture. They'll never complain, because they want to know. And at the end of the day, people, this is the bottom line, people don't pay analysts for their stock recommendations or their price targets. They pay them to get information so they can make their own decisions. And that's what Troy tries to do. He tries to put out information, and you make your own mind, if given the risks and given the upside. Because Troy's a bull. He's actually a long-term Tesla bull. He's not a bear. You can make your own mind up given the risks that are there. But long-term, what drives Tesla economics is global EV adoption is going to continue to soar. This year, it's going to be 10%. Next year, it'll be 15%. By 2026, it'll be 30%. By 2030, it's going to be 60%. And as long as Tesla keeps its EV share, and I know people hate when I do that, their volumes go up at 40 to 50% a year. That's the long-term investment thesis for Tesla. They keep their 20% EV share, and as EV adoption explodes, volumes go up at 40 to 50% per year. And that's how Tesla goes from, 173 today to 550 sometime next year, and 2000 in future years. That's the thesis. But in the short term, what Troy's trying to do is forecast volumes and forecast price and say, look, this is the issue for this quarter or for maybe early next year. And people should appreciate that. They shouldn't give him grief for quote unquote spreading FUD. And I go back to this point. A lot of people will DM me, say, why are you posting that Reuters article? Well, everybody can see the Reuters article. Every Wall Street shop has circulated at 6 a.m. Me posting it on Twitter is not going to change one iota what the stock price is going to do today. And I saw yesterday.
Wait.
Come on.
I mean, you don't.
You're giving yourself too little credit, Gary.
Exactly.
You guys are living in a bubble. You're living in a bubble. Sawyer Merritt deleted a tweet yesterday. Wait, hear me out. Because he said he deleted because he retweeted something that Bloomberg or Reuters said. It's like, you don't think that the Wall Street shops have already circulated to all their clients by the time you get up in the morning? I mean, you're being unrealistic. And so I don't think that I don't say any influence. I have a very small amount of influence on the stock price. And you just got to remember the way Wall Street works is there's somebody on the trading desk, and I used to work for a Wall Street firm. I used to work for Sanford Bernstein. It takes all the clippings of all the stocks, they put them together, and somebody decides what goes into this clipping book, and they send them out to all their clients. And then there's a morning meeting from 7 to 8 o'clock Eastern time where the analysts, if it's a story like yesterday's or today that was moving the stock, they're supposed to get up and comment on the story, if they don't have any research for the day. And their views get circulated, and usually a salesperson will summarize it, and it'll all go out to the clients. So when I'm posting something from Bloomberg or some trade rag, everybody on Wall Street's already seen it. I'm not adding any value by posting on Twitter.
I get that. So they do their 24-hourly, morning meeting. Then during the day, usually they don't update. Do you really believe that none of the people at Wall Street, option traders, market makers, are not on your Twitter feed? I think you are the only big enough account they will follow, and whatever you say, and if you have a very critical tone, they pick it up. I mean, I'm not saying you're moving the price, but I think you underestimated how much you are the live feed, as is Sawyer, as is Omar, of what Tesla is.
I'm not the only one, and that was the point I was going to make. I think people look at Sawyer because he's usually the first news story out, and so a lot of people who follow him, because he buys a lot of these sources, he's the best at getting news information out first. I think Omar, because he's close to Elon, I think a lot of people will read what he says and say, okay, well, and maybe it's fictitious, but he positions himself.
Oh no, it's not fictitious.
Right.
I have to prove that it's not fictitious.
I see Elon respond to him. So I think there are some accounts on Twitter that people pay attention to, and you just named 3 of them, and I think there's some. But we can't move, and this is what I get annoyed by. So when Troy puts stuff out, I think there's some hedge funds that pay Troy whatever he charges on Patreon so they can get his early read on stuff.
He only has 2 prices on Patreon, $5 or $10. I mean, one hedge fund manager, more or less, is not gonna give him much more income to Troy.
But I don't think we have as much influence as people think. I think you underestimate the way Wall Street works, that they're clipping. So if I tweet something, they're clipping it, and if somebody thinks it's value added, I can put up on Bloomberg, Gary Black's feed, and I can see it almost like a news story. Somebody will clip it and send it around to clients. But if Reuters says something or Bloomberg says something, that's going to get far more play than any tweet.
Yes, because they have a different press release, and that's why we can come back to communications at Tesla. But when I go into my brokerage accounts, I see Tesla comments, of course, some of the press releases, but if they are from an analyst, they are mainly yours, sometimes Ross, and that's it. I don't find that Tony or any of the others are considered specialists, maybe Adam Jones, but they're really, and maybe Dan Ives when he says something more.
Why?
Why?
You're not paying commissions. So Tony Sakanaki is only going to send his research to somebody who pays him commissions. We pay them commissions, okay? You're never going to see it. And if you ask me, who has more influence over institutional clients, Tony Sakanaki or Gary Black? It's clearly Tony Sakanaki. Even though you don't see his stuff, you're not paying him any commissions. That's why you don't get his feed. But anybody who's paying him commissions is getting an email from the salesperson who represents you in Santa Barbara, in California, Southern California, and they're sending you an email at 6 a.m. saying, here's what Tony's saying, right? And that's what people have to recognize, that Wall Street is very efficient at disseminating information, and they'll take news stories and package them and send them out. And then the analyst is supposed to talk about any news story. And that's why, Tony had a report today. It was about pricing, and he packaged it together with the U.S. pricing and the factory, being whatever they want to call it, less production. He packaged it all together in one report, but it went out as one blast from the Bernstein Research Department this morning at 6 a.m. And so,
now,
far more influence.
One question I still have is on Troy. Lots of people get always hung up on the idea that Troy doesn't have equity or doesn't hold any Tesla stock, right? Do you think it is because of all these disclosures when you're an analyst? He probably imagined at the beginning, no? So
No.
I find this really strange because he seems to be a bull.
He is a bull. He is a bull.
But clearly says he doesn't want to, or he doesn't invest in the stock. So how
he may not
how
have
do you
the
put
money. He may not have. Look, he's. I don't know what he does for a living. He's got a regular job, and he has so many Patreon users, but it doesn't really pay the bills, right? The Patreon users are kind of like. And this is why I'm more negative, I think, on Twitter than most people are. It's really hard to get people on Twitter to pay money for content.
That's true.
And it just doesn't happen. And I tell people, I've tried with the subscribers, and I'm happy that you guys are subscribers, but it's hard to monetize it. And I think Troy has found it's hard to monetize it as well. It's just it's not his full-time job. But he owns some Tesla stock, and I think he trades it. I mean, I don't think he trades it like a day trader, but I think he does own Tesla. I mean, I've talked to him in the past, and I think he owns Tesla.
Okay, well, he stated a couple of weeks ago that he doesn't, but maybe that was just at that particular moment.
Yeah,
I got it.
I mean, it could also be. I think Troy it seems like he's somebody that has a very high moral, compass. Compass, very high moral compass, right? So
he's in the UK, right? He's in the UK.
I don't know.
He's very principled, and look, when people give
that's what it says on his Twitter.
When people give Troy a hard time for quote unquote spreading FUD, they're missing the point. That's what his job is. And he views his job as to get information out there, good or bad. He's got a long-term bullish perspective. Same reason I do. EV adoption is soaring. Tesla's going to capture a large share of it. But that's not what he's doing when he's putting out quarterly volumes. Think about the difference between what we just said. Long-term, he's bullish, but in the near term, he's putting out volume information that maybe for next quarter, or pricing it maybe next quarter. And so people just got to stop. And I'm done yelling at people about it. But I just get annoyed. Then people yell at Troy or myself or Sawyer for putting. And Rob, the other day, somebody got mad at him for. He wrote this. It's like stupid. You don't get mad for people for putting out negative information. You need that negative information to make a good investment decision. So don't dissuade us from talking, or we won't talk.
I mean, the guy, the guy at the helm with this whole story, Elon Musk, what does he say? We need a marketplace of ideas so that we can make the best decisions. Like how is this is literally within that, just because it's uncomfortable, it is not something that like tickles your fancy, doesn't mean that it's not valuable. Right. And I think it's sort of the challenge. I think a lot of investors are learning, like especially like myself. I'm a newbie. I've been in the stock market for 10 years. I'm a baby in this market. But one of the biggest things that's most value for me is to lean into the stuff that makes me uncomfortable to read. Because what that tells me is, hey, guess what? Maybe you're not as sure as you were about the thesis that you have. So how's that a bad thing? It's like, if anything, it strengthens your resolve. Strengthens your thing.
Why,
your
I think a lot of people believe that myself and Rob and Troy can move the stock. So their view is, why are you putting this out there? Because you're just going to knock the stock price out. I have clients who say that. And that's just stupid. It's just so naive. It's so naive.
I think it's more that it might be like a leftover sort of 2016, 2019 period where I think a lot of people took it to heart to ensure that this company was going to survive. It almost became personal for a lot of people. And I think when they see stories that are damaging to the thing that they're including myself, I'm so passionate about the story. So when they see anything that could potentially harm it, I think we get defensive. We're like, what the hell? How dare you question the moral, why Elon's doing this or whatever. Of course this is a good thing, obviously. But I think I think again, like if you want to make something better, you have to look at all sides. You have to analyze everything that's in front of you, and you can't just ignore something that's happening because it's not fitting the positive narrative. I think it's and this is why I have people that are of varied mindsets like Gary and Alexandra and everybody else that's on here to like get those ideas out, because it's important. That's how we make the best decisions.
Yeah. And actually, I liked this morning a reaction you had, Farzad, and I think you can explain that again, to an article that came in the German newspaper. It was in English, but it was done in Germany, on how problematic the ramp is in Berlin. I mean, it was absolutely over dramatic, no doubt about it. They obviously want to be at the rhythm of 5,000 cars a week by the end of the year. They're not there yet. They were supposed to have 12,000 employees by the end of the year. They're at 7,000. I actually want to go back to an old video I did with you, Farzad, where I said Berlin is a tough place. I understand why they went there. They had all the subsidies, but it's certainly not a grown automobile employee place, right? That would be around Cologne, or that would be around Stuttgart, or maybe you can even have it around Hanover, but certainly not next to Berlin. Berlin was always an administration. It's the Volks, it's the literal people, and I mean, building a car plant there. Fair enough. Now we have it. I mean, don't cry over spilled milk. But so there they are, and the article was like really negative about it, and they will never get there and whatever. And then you reacted, and I let you carry it on there because it was just perfect. Go ahead, do it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. So I actually sent the tweet to producer wife, have her pull it up here in a second. So it was it was in response to a Business Insider sort of, business insider trading, as it gets called sometimes. So here's a tweet. So Business Insider said, Tesla's German gigafactory is in total chaos, quote unquote, due to staff shortages, reports say. And I said, also known as Tesla Berlin is cranking out ridiculous numbers of cars, and they need as much help as they can get. Right. So it's like and the reason why I'm confident in making that statement is because while I was at the company, there was always a state of chaos. Somebody replied to one of the tweets and said, when you're growing a manufacturing company 40 to 50% per year, it's going to be chaotic in there.
Absolutely.
And so like that's what it is. And I think there might be a cultural sort of like you kind of alluded to a little bit, Alexandra, where maybe chaos is not maybe viewed as an acceptable working environment. And like what I describe as chaos is like there's just fires everywhere, and you need go-getters to go put them out. You just have to figure out how to do it, and that's how you innovate. That's how you move fast.
Well, that's Tesla, right?
That's Tesla. That's just how it works. And I think it might just be a FUD misreport, like trying to spread some sort of fear and uncertainty.
Could be a cultural thing.
Yeah. But it's,
it
to me,
is.
it's
Can you imagine the Germans?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so glad I'm not anymore. But it's just like, they have never seen a thing like this.
The culture is alive and well. That was what I took away from it. Like, okay, thank God. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because that's how it should be if you want to move as fast as humanly possible. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was one of the stories I was not worried about, but there we go. What else was on our to-do list today?
30,000 versus Robotaxi.
Let's hit it.
At least it's not Twitter.
So I think I kicked it off.
Bringing it up.
Would love to get you guys' opinion about this. So if they had a $30,000 car in China, which is, a scaled down Model 3, it's probably in a compact category. It, fits in with what BYD is doing, but it's much smaller than a Model 3 because you got to differentiate it. Why is that a bad thing? And I'll just start with that as an open-ended question. Why wouldn't that help?
Well, but what you're saying is, rather than now pretend and wait for a Robotaxi, which may or may not see the day of the light, the light of the day. Oh, I'm good today. I'm putting them all the other way around.
With blue fingernails.
Exactly. That's it. That's my.
Did you see what my wife wrote about him, by the way? She said, I know you said blue nails were bad luck, but at least they're cute. She put that in the private chat.
Did everybody see my jacket? I
know. So cool.
So this is my Harley Davidson jacket, and I wear this around, there it is. I wear this around Chicago, and some guy came up to me the other day. He says, how's it ride? And I just said, pretty good, even though I don't have one. I just pretend because I like the jacket. But, I say that just as an advertisement because Harley's been one of our best performing stocks.
I know. And you have a good one.
22% year to date. And I don't know, it's been a great stock.
You're looking very sharp in that jacket, no doubt, Gary. And let me tell the story of my nails. I usually always have red nails. Everybody knows me for my red nails. But about a year ago, I had blue nails, and it was the worst month, my personal worst month for a long, long time. And my husband said, cut it on the blue nails. And yesterday, for I don't know what stupid reason, I went into nails and blue nails, right? Here we are.
You're trying to break the curse.
How often you change your nail color?
About in 3-4 weeks, but I think this one is going to go quicker.
I think you need to change.
I don't want to be responsible for December. Let me get back to that 30,000 car. So you would like them, rather than now have this pillow car, you want to have a car. You want to have a car.
Yeah, because think Cybertruck is going to be made in Austin. China could start working on a $30,000 car, get it out there. It's where it's needed. They can export it into Europe. So you solve two birds with one stone. Kill two birds with one stone. And then let's see how it goes. It doesn't mean it has to come to the U.S.
Yeah.
I wanted it in the U.S.
Yeah, I think
they cannibalize Model 3 too much in the U.S. But remember, prices are much lower in China. You know, they start at like 40. I just want them to be able to compete more effectively with BYD, and not to have, look, we're going to have another in January. People are going to be debating whether they're going to cut price again, and you're going to have Chinese consumers waiting for a price cut again. So you got to address this issue now, I think.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree with you. I think the European market, then you think about, I don't know, South America at some point. You have a lot of countries in Africa. You got a lot of countries in Asia. There's just such a huge market for this cheaper car that it's a car.
Operating margin of 30% on a $30,000 car.
You can, but your dollar profit per car is going to be lower. You can get 30%, but just think about it. You're going to make $10,000 a car instead of $15,000 a car. So yeah, it's not great from a cannibalization standpoint, because you got to think about it that way.
But volume,
like 3 to 4x.
You'll get it in volume. And look, I go back to, you know, what moves the stock? Volume still moves the stock with Tesla more than gross margins. Gross margins is number 2. But like if we get to January 2nd or whenever they announce fourth quarter volumes and they're in the 450, 460 range, stock's going up, even if their margins are a little bit lower, you know, come a couple of weeks later.
What's your number?
I'm at 430. I try to be conservative. But remember, last quarter I was trying to be conservative and I was pretty close. I was almost dead on for the earnings. I think I was at $1.09. I was the lowest of anybody. And it came in at $1.05. But I try to keep my numbers below where I think they're going to be, because I don't want to be surprised on the downside. So I'm at 430. I think the street's at 430 right now.
Yeah, everybody. And Troy, I think, is 428 or something like that. So that seems to be...
a lot of the Twitter Tesla people are much higher than 430. You know?
Yeah, but I think we're all learning our lessons. I think Q3 was bad.
Look, China's got competitive pressures, and it's got two things. It's got competitive pressures led by BYD, and it's got an economy that's been stop and start as they've shut things down. And now you're seeing it go the other way, where the government is saying, hey, look, we're going to dismantle a lot of this regulatory apparatus for COVID. And we're not going to, for instance, take people who test positive and put them in a separate area. We're not going to do it anymore. We're going to try to work through it, which I think that opens up the Chinese economy, and you get another leg forward, and that'll help next year. It'll help Tesla next year.
At least from Q2 onwards, because what I read today is it's not at all decided whether this is like, I mean, nothing will happen until the New Year, the Chinese New Year, which is end of January, 10 days, right? And then, so maybe beginning of February, but lots of people say it may actually only be put in place beginning of April after the winter.
Yeah, and what I'm interested to see is this 12,001 subsidy that's supposed to end on 12/31. Is it going to get extended? Because there's talk that it might get extended. That would be very interesting, you know. And I wouldn't mind if it gets extended.
So, do you believe that? I think we talked about this before. I just want to mention it again. The $30,000 car will only be produced in China.
I don't know. I'm just look. This is where I sometimes don't do a good job communicating. Then my belief is they shouldn't wait for Robotaxi, because with Robotaxi, it could still be another 2 or 3 years before the car is able to quote unquote drive itself. It may be 6 months, but look, I've been saying this for 3 years and getting, you know, grief by people that it's not going to drive itself anytime soon. And that's been the right view. You know, don't put any valuation for Robotaxi. I don't think they should wait until they get Robotaxi to launch this $30,000 car. I think they should try to get it out there as soon as they can, limit it to China for now, get the competitive issues addressed, and stop talking about price cutting and volume cuts. And I don't want to see another couple quarters like third quarter and fourth quarter in China. I want them to fix the problem, right? And I think a $30,000 car will fix the problem. I just don't know how long it's going to take them to get a car like that out there. It may be 6 months.
That's where my head goes to, right?
Didn't we have a design? I have a feeling a couple of months ago they were talking about having a design. Not
China design.
I haven't seen anything official. I think that was outsiders trying to come up with designs.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way I think about this car is, okay, so it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be faster to produce, so higher volumes, cheaper to produce. So in my head, I'm like, okay, so if I announce this too early on, there's a chance Model Y and Model 3 are significantly impacted from a demand perspective.
Not Model Y, Model 3. Model 3 definitely.
Model 3.
Because the size will be smaller.
Yeah, Model Y is huge. I mean, it's especially for
it would be a hatchback, right? We're sure it's going to be a hatchback.
I think it'll be a hatchback. But I think it'll be significantly smaller than a Model 3. Right?
Yeah, and higher.
You think about the way Mercedes and Audi and other luxury designers, when they go down into that $30,000 to $35,000 segment, they want to clearly differentiate it from their $50,000 car. And Tesla, again, they're smart. They should do the same. They should make sure that everybody sees that, like, this is a compact car. It's not a full size car.
More of a city car.
Sure.
I agree with you.
Like a Civic type style, right? Is that kind of what we're thinking? Like a Civic hatchback, sort of smaller car, like BMW
probably
3.
Even smaller than that.
Yeah.
Because you obviously don't need a lot of a front.
Very little leg room for the rear passengers, but still a 4-seater.
Yeah.
Four people could fit in it. Not me. Yeah. But
how tall are you?
Could fit in it. I have a hard time fitting in a Tesla Model 3. I mean, I have a Y, which is.
I never use ours. I only go into the X. You really have to get into it, like in a Porsche in the good old days, right?
It's too small for me.
That's it. We're getting older, Gary. We won't admit it, but it's just.
I could sit in the front, but Model 3, I remember when Omar, because I've never really ridden around in a Model 3, Model Y. Omar took around his Model 3. It's like, this thing is tight. It's really hard for me to fit into it, but I think it'll be smaller than that. And
I have my two next to each other in front of the garage. So if the X and the 3, and when you're from one side, when you have the X, you don't see the 3 at all from no angle, right? You really have to turn around to find it.
So you don't drive around the 3? You drive the X?
Only the X for the best, right?
Good for you. Yeah, I would do that too.
I work hard for it and I love it. This is my car. There's just nothing else comes close. This one is now 8 months.
Okay, so it's been it's part of the new. It's the new X, not the old X.
It's the new X. It's the refresh X. We've taken it for at least 4 road trips now to Vegas. We're doing every 4 weeks a 2-hour trip to Paso Robles. It's a dream come true. It's absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. Oh, there is, because it has, those things that you put down against the sun. How do you call that in English?
The sun
Yeah, exactly. And so they are not there. They are on the side, and you have to bring them over and open them. And my gosh, it's awesome. But if you have quickly sun, you better know what you're doing, because if you're in traffic, exactly,
just let the car drive itself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look, if I knew, back to your question, for that, if I knew that Robotaxi would be, again, 99.9% no interventions by next year, then I would say go for it. But I don't know. Elon's been wrong since 2019 when he said there'd be 1 million robotaxis on the road by the end of 2020. And it's just, his bias is that it's going to get done, but it just doesn't get done. And then you got to get it approved. So I don't think they can take a chance and say, well, let's do it, both cars at the same time. I don't know what the downside is to getting a compact car out there. And when you get to Robotaxi, just remove, and I'm not an engineer, obviously, remove the steering wheel and remove the pedals at that point. Why can't you do that? I don't know from an engineering standpoint why that's so hard.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I want to... Oh, go ahead.
Please.
Go ahead, you.
No,
go
please,
ahead with Sandy first. But because we were talking about this approval for, level 4 and now Robotaxi. There's actually nothing in place. Nothing.
No.
I mean, I'm sure they're all working on it in those government agencies, but we had this discussion last week in a YouTube. You may want to link to that. And it just seems that government is so late always to jump on these occasions. So if we're waiting for an authorization, I think we won't have it. I think actually the biggest thing will be to make sure Tesla insurance actually covers the whole liability side of it. And that will only be doable once Tesla provides them all the data, because I mean, insurers, as you know, are just actuaries who need to be reassured with numbers. And so if Tesla insurance says, okay, you can let them all drive, we cover, if ever, the worst of the worst happens, I think they don't need to ask for an authorization initially. I mean, will the governments come up with something? Yes, but you already have a lot of US states that approved it, that have it in their laws. I don't think we're waiting for an authorization. I think the biggest hurdle now is to convince the insurance and then get it out there. But I don't think they're there.
States like California will require that the manufacturer accept the liability associated with calling it level 4, level 5, which Tesla's never been able to do. Because once you call it level 4, level 5, you're basically saying you're liable if the car, crashes or something.
No matter what.
Yeah. And so I don't know if Tesla's ready to do that, but most states that I've seen, like I've looked at California's and Texas,
Florida,
in order to call it to get a permit for Robotaxi, even just a permit, it has to be at least a level 4, and that's up to the manufacturer to call it what they want, which means it's a liability question. And
exactly, that's it.
I don't know if Tesla's willing to do that.
Yeah. And so and that's something they actually, what I wanted to say is, we're not waiting for a government agency to give them permission. It's actually Tesla declaring it. And if they see they don't have the data yet, or they don't want to declare it or whatever, I completely agree with you. Then put the $30,000 car out with a steering wheel and let people have it.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the production capacity. Maybe we'll go to Q&A. Did we have any other topics that we wanted to hit before?
Well, I've been reading some of the comments, and people said, why do a $30,000 car in China when you could just export out, make all you can produce and then just export it out to more places? And I think that's a fair argument, but you got to remember, Berlin is going to keep ramping up. So Berlin, maybe they're at, 2,000 a week now, but, will they be at 5,000 a week in a few months? Probably. Right.
Yeah.
So you're going to lose a big quote unquote customer in Europe because they're not going to need as much volume. So you're going to have to find other countries to replace Europe once Berlin gets up to, let's call it 5,000 a week in production.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Think about the complexities around all the different jurisdictions with the legalities as well. That's why if you're going to have production that's going to be for this cheaper car, that's going to be millions of cars a year, and it's going to be bottlenecked by potential regulations and taking responsibility for the software. Like, to me, it makes that's the signal to me that says it's going to have a steering wheel and pedals, because it makes no sense to build that much production, not be able to sell for like 2 to 3 years.
Well,
like,
think
it makes
about
no
third
sense.
world countries. If you're going to go into lesser, let's suppose you go to India or Indonesia or someplace, they're dirt roads. They're not going to have the FSD capability that you have in California.
And will the Chinese ever let them? Will the Chinese ever let Teslas drive with FSD in China? Not sure.
Sure. No, Baidu is in 10 cities right now with level 4 Robotaxi, and there's restrictions on it, and they're geo-fenced within each city. But yeah, the Chinese are very gung-ho about getting autonomy up and running. Just look at Baidu. Baidu's in 10 cities now. They're all geo-fenced, but they're going to try to bring them all together at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Any other topics before we hit Q&A? Should we, for the last 10 minutes here?
I think we're good.
We do the share buyback?
Yes. Let me.
Let's go ahead and do
exactly for the share buyback. I heard an argument. I think it was Emmett Peppert who said it, where he said maybe the board doesn't do a share buyback because there are some institutional investors who don't want it. I was like,
I never
exactly. Why would an institutional investor not want a share buyback?
No,
Any investor.
Yeah. Think of what Leo's rant today. I think it captures it perfectly. He thinks like an institution. You've got $19 billion in cash at the end of September. You're going to have, he says, another $5 billion. Let's say $4 billion in the fourth quarter, and then you're going to have another. You have $21 billion at the end of third quarter, another $4 billion in fourth quarter, and then
No.
19 billion. You got $45 billion at the end of next year. I mean, at 4%. And the first thing an institution said is, why are you doing that? You're investing it at 4%. Your cost of equity, if you think about cost of equity as, you know, some premium over a risk-free rate, and you have to multiply it times the riskiness, 13, 14%, and you're investing at 4%. And yeah, you could have a recession, but are you really going to go through $30 billion worth of cash?
Yeah.
No institution I ever talked to says don't do a buyback. People love buybacks because, as you said before, Alexandra, it's not just the IRR of the buyback, but it's the commitment and the conviction that, hey, the stock is cheap, and we're trying to show everybody that it's cheap. And we personally believe it's cheap because we believe in our fundamentals. And so just think about it this way. Somebody says, well, if you bought back $10 billion worth of stock, how much is the stock price going to go up? I said, I don't know, but I know when Elon sells $10 billion of stock,
I know how much it goes down, right?
the stock goes
Especially if he
down.
doesn't say when it's done.
So the math isn't always perfect, but it's just symbolic that, you know, when you have days like today or days like whatever it was 2 days ago where it dropped, you know, 7% because of this production rumor, you're in there supporting your stock. You don't have the shorts ganging up and trying to make money because there's no buyers. You know, it just puts a floor on the stock. So I just think it's something that it shows conviction. It shows that the board believes in the stock, and you always have some firepower to go in and buy the stock. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I can't imagine an institution saying, put it in cash for the recession. It just doesn't sound like any institution I know.
Exactly. I mean, it's just a bad use of your money, right? I mean, but there we are. No, I don't have anything to add to buybacks. I think I've said it all. I just hope that one day they wake up and do it.
Yeah.
How much do you think Leo, being, you know, a huge player, and Elon, you know, he follows him. How much did he going on a rant this morning? Do you think that helps? A lot or not?
Well,
really,
do you think
distracted?
I don't feel Elon at the moment commenting on anything for Tesla, just like nothing. Today he commented on pictures, AI pictures that that Carpathy did, which were actually good pictures, I have to admit.
Look good.
Put the fire sign on it, right? All good. And I think he also commented on an airplane by Boeing. I don't remember exactly what it was. So not that there was no matter to discuss anything from Tesla, but there was just nothing out there. You know, we have different opinions of whether it's a good idea to buy Twitter or not. I still very much support that. But I mean, the one thing that is true is we don't have his attention at the moment, and we have nobody else's attention. There's just no spokesperson out there. I saw a question earlier. Do we know who is behind the Tesla official Twitter account? We don't, obviously. I do imagine it's Martin or maybe Viv, his number two. You know, the lady that was on that third row podcast interviews
Right.
from Europe. But that's it. That's just. Does anybody know? I don't.
I don't. I think it's Martin. I think the IR department does it, but you know, he doesn't answer a lot of these questions. I mean, his tweets today had nothing to do with anything about the stock price, which was amazing to me.
Yeah. I think for me, if there's one light at the end of the tunnel for this, is that it does seems like there's a trend towards Elon starting to really try and delegate a little bit more of some of the work that may have been stuck with him. So like things like Dan being a showcase at Semi, Neuralink, everybody at AI Day. But of course, this is different than the rest of the corporate governance, right? And it's something that he was never really fond of. So there's nothing to delegate. So it seems like somebody just has to step up.
How did you like that Semi presentation on Thursday? I mean, obviously it's completely vanished in the perception of anybody because there's so much happened since, but wasn't it great?
I thought it was okay. I wouldn't put it in the great category because it still left a lot of information, even to somebody who's buying trucks. It didn't give out a lot of information. Like, so if it carries 82,000 pounds, how much is the battery take up? Is it 10? Is it 20? Nope, nobody knows. What's the pricing? And then look, what these guys do is they look at price versus what their operating cost per mile is. They didn't give out much information on stuff like that. So I don't know. Maybe they're doing that one-on-one with people who are interested, but I couldn't figure that stuff out. And usually, you know, I can, as an analyst, figure out, you know, stuff, but I couldn't put any economics on because they didn't give it out.
True. I didn't.
I have a theory around that real quick.
What?
I think it was very calculated to be catering to the driver, because if you start talking about how the truck can potentially replace the driver with, say, full self-driving and how this is going to be better for your business, I think you're going to have a huge mess on your hands with drivers.
But
That's
why
my
not
theory.
tell people how much of the load you could carry? If it can carry 82,000 pounds and the battery, nobody knows how big it is, why wouldn't you disclose that so you can do some calculations as a driver?
I mean, you could, but most trailers don't ride. Like most trucks aren't at 82,000 pounds.
I know that.
That's the thing. Yeah. So it's maybe they thought it wasn't sort of applicable for that use case, or they thought that the number, I don't know, maybe the number is not that impressive, and they don't want to display.
And I really
question.
had the feeling they watched closely what they were saying. It was really for one scripted, and they knew what they wanted to get out, and they knew also what they didn't want to get out.
I also think with Elon patching things up with Apple and bringing Amazon in, a lot of advertisers are going to pay attention to that. And so, I've been negative, as you know, on the whole Twitter purchase, but I think he's trying to play a bad hand, right? Because he's got a lot of debt and he had to get rid of a lot of people. And so I think the advertisers are settling down. And I'd say in the last week, he's done some good things and getting Tim Cook back on the platform, convincing Amazon to come on the platform. Those are two huge advertisers. And the advertisers I talked to 2 or 3 of them now, they're all watching this. And what they want is a one-on-one call with somebody from Twitter. It doesn't have to be Elon, but they don't want to, be on some Zoom call or some Spaces call where, he's preaching to them. They like that, but they want a one-on-one discussion with somebody. And so they just have to get out and do that. So look, what I've been advocating is that Elon go out and meet with some of these big advertisers himself. He met with Tim Cook. He's brilliant. He patched it up. And, not only did he not get booted off the app platform, not that he would have, but he's got Apple back on there, and he brought Amazon in. So a lot of people are going to pay attention to that. So it's got to make him feel better that the economics of Twitter are getting better because the advertisers are going to come back. And what this advertiser that I talked to a lot said to me is, you've got to remember, Gare, that 2024 is huge in so many ways because you got the election and you got the Olympics. And he's just got to get it ready. We're in 2023 already. He's got 1 year to get it ready so that it can take center stage in that. And that's when, if Twitter were to come public again, it would probably come public in 2024. So,
or after a very good 2024,
Right. But he's got to get some key roles filled because so many people quit on him. And look, it's the product hasn't broke, it seems to be functioning fine. Yeah. So I think it's turned the corner, and I think that probably will let Elon, I don't want to say pull back because he's not going to pull back until it's fixed. But I think he could probably see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why I would be very, very surprised if he were to leave Tesla. That just makes no sense to me. So.
Fair enough.
Good.
Yeah, no,
go to the questions.
Yeah, let's do a couple. We're almost at an hour 30 here. So let's there was a super chat earlier in the stream. Thank you all for commenting. Drop your questions below. We're probably only going to get to a couple here, but producer wife, let's go ahead and pull up the super chat from Wesley. Wesley, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. I know you dropped this probably an hour ago, but really appreciate you for being patient. Why would Tesla design a new product instead of taking down existing prices? Isn't it more cost effective to lower the price instead of a new product? How do you think about that? Gary, do you want to?
It depends if it's strategic. And again, I go back to the U.S. They're not offering the long range right now. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring a mid-range product to get the product comfortably below the $55,000 price point, so they can get the $7,500. They could, but bringing out a mid-range Model 3 is not really a new product, right? It's just kind of a line extension, and it's not going to be that different from the long range. But what you're doing is by having a mid-range product, you can get the price down below 55 grand and you get the 75. So you're getting a price cut without taking the price cut yourself. I think in China, it's a whole different ball game because of BYD. Anybody who follows BYD, they're super aggressive. They have a super good platform. They've come, I don't say out of nowhere because they've always been there, but they're now the market leader, and it's got to get everybody's attention. And when Elon's focused on who are the best competitors of Tesla around the world, I bet if you say, who is the single biggest competitor that you worry about, I bet he would say BYD. So that's why I would bring out a product just for China. I agree with the person who asked the question. I wouldn't lower prices everywhere, but I think in China you got to do something because clearly there's an issue in China, right? If you've got a year-end promotion, you got too much inventory, there's rumors about production coming down, something's going on that they're not explaining, and to me that says there's an issue.
It's heating up. It's heating up.
Heating up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Never any smoke without a fire. That's it.
There's something going
Oh.
on in China that we're not all aware of, but it makes me worried.
Let's do a couple more here. Next question. Hi, Farzad, Alexander, and Gary. What do you all think of a possible IP theft from China? Alexandra, any thoughts?
I mean, this has been a subject for the last 20 years, right? Anybody who was constructing, manufacturing, sharing information with the Chinese, that was always an issue. I think Elon had the right attitude, saying we're making better products and be it, right? And I think the market is big enough to take this into account and just, I mean, if there are cars that look like Teslas but don't have the same performance, don't have the same features, Tesla still wins, even though some other cars may be sold. So I don't think this is something that can ever be solved. The Chinese have this attitude, don't have the same rules and regulations that we have here. I don't think this is a new threat and is anything that we have to worry about today.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think as long as in a digital world you can steal anything, and then we're going to get more digital. So as long as you're faster than everybody else, who cares, right? So that's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Gary, what are your thoughts there?
I don't disagree with you guys. I don't really have a strong opinion about it, to be honest.
Okay. Let's do one more. How do you?
Oh, I can tell that. Stéphane Bédard.
Yeah.
Hey, Stéphane, bonjour.
Thank you.
So why is Tesla having?
Go for it, please.
No problem. We heard you, Doc. So why is Tesla having a hard time finding skilled labor in Germany? Because Brandenburg, so this is the suburbs of Berlin, is just not at all an industrial hub. It is like if you would put, I don't even know what other comparison I could do. I don't know whether in Philadelphia they have a lot of university, whether they have also production there. But in Berlin, Berlin has been the old type capital. Then we had all the time Germany was divided. So then Berlin was divided, which obviously put a lot of stress on it. And then after the reunification, there was a lot of subsidies and help. But it is mainly East German people living still in that part of Germany, so that it wasn't an industrial hub at all. Lots of subsidies when Tesla decided to go there. Also, Berlin is a very cool town. I can completely understand why Elon likes it. It's a party town. It's a very young town, quite woke. It has a lot of in Europe. It's certainly very special in that way. But that doesn't mean it has automobile skilled labor. It just doesn't. You have those people around Stuttgart because that's where Mercedes is. You have those people around Cologne because that was traditionally where Volkswagen is, and Ford was for a long time. And this is in the northeast of Germany. So people moving there for a good job, yes, they will. But is it easy to bring people to move there? No, it isn't. So that was a difficulty that could have been anticipated, no doubt about it.
How far is Brandenburg from Berlin?
I think about 25 minutes by car.
Oh, so it's
trying to do a train. Yeah, it's really suburbs, and it. I mean, it's not the nicest weather. Berlin is a strange city. In the summer, you have the sun at 3:00 in the morning. It's really because it's in European time, but it's one of the most east places, so it has a very strange rhythm to it. When you live in town in Berlin, it doesn't matter. It's a little bit like in San Francisco, and you would live in San Jose or whatever, really out there. But if you live in the city, it's quite pleasant because it is a very active and young and university city with lots of international people because the parliament is there and lots of things happen there, newspapers, journalism. But it's certainly not a typical industrial hub.
Got it.
Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. All right. Let's call it there. Yeah. I think we've been at it for a little bit here. Thank you guys so much. Seriously. I hope this was a value to the community. I think it definitely was. I always really appreciate y'all's honesty and just how willing you are to be open about your thoughts and allow sort of them to filter into the community and for everybody to take that in. And I can see from the comments, everybody really values both of your opinions. Real quick, before we go offline, I definitely want to plug stuff that y'all do very, very well. Gary Black is on Twitter. Make sure you go follow him. Look, he's even got a bull in his header, y'all. He's of course is a Tesla bull. Come on.
FFND, the future fund. Don't forget.
There it is.
Yes.
There it is.
I got it up. Future Fund. Make sure you check that out. Future Fund TF. Future Fund
FFND.
ETF.com.
FFND is
Yes.
the ticker.
FFND.
Buy
And
like
then,
you could buy Tesla.
And then Gary Black, you can also find him on Twitter at Gary Black 00. And then you can also find our favorite Tesla boomer mama. We have Alexandra
we
Merz
go.
on Substack. Make sure you go find her, alexandramerz.substack.com. And you can also
There you
find
go.
her on Twitter as well.
Yeah, and so many fake ones now.
I think this is the
I'm
real
nearly
one.
at 30,000. Look at that. My
Look
gosh.
at you.
You're moving.
My goodness. So
I am.
popular.
Fastest growers.
Yeah.
There
And you hear
go.
that music in the background? The producer wife with the production quality
Straight
there.
out.
Look
Wow.
at
Thank
We're
you.
hip, y'all.
Okay.
Thank you
thanks
so
for
much.
the-
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, producer wife. I'll see you
Bye-bye.
guys later. Take it easy,
I'll
everybody.
change my nails, I promise. Take care.
Please. Bye-bye, everybody.